how cold is that lead? How warm is that lead? All of these things are going to affect that number. But my point in saying that is you have to, and you obviously echo it, is that you have to know what your numbers are so that you can improve upon that and see if that's working. Especially if you're at the beginning. How many calls did I make my first 90 days in real estate? All right, so I'm going to ask you, is this fake or is this real back here? What was your initial thought?
If I didn't actually know that you were somewhere else, I would honestly think it was a filter.
Yeah.
But I know it's not.
It's not. You breathe differently. Just feels different. Like just on your skin. It just, even if the sunlight's not hitting you, it just, I'm looking this way off the distance and it's just mountains, it's just sea and mountains and then homes dotted along those mountains.
I'll let the audience know I'll let them know you're in Greece. What island are you on?
Yeah, so we're in a small island called Samos, which is about as far east as you can go before you hit Turkey. So you've got the mainland, of course, to the west of this island, way in between, basically between Samos and the mainland of Greece, you've got all the Mediterranean islands, which really allows us to, you can get on a ferry boat and just island hop. Obviously, some are many hours away and some are, within a couple hours to get a little bit different flavor of Greece. But this one would be considered, on the smaller side. This is the town of Karlovasi in Samos. So Samos is the island, and then Karlovasi is a city on the coast. And then last night we were more inland, having dinner where my in-laws were born, which is called Leka. Beautiful little town. It's every picture you would imagine an artist would draw: the cobblestone streets, the dim lights. Walking past old shops and the ladies with the aprons on and they're, stirring that big pot and just a little bit of puff of smoke comes up from what they're cooking and you just smell it, you see it, and you trip along the stair, along the walkway because it's inclined and not perfect. And that imperfection is just so endearing and beautiful. So it's just, words are hard to come by to describe a place like this. And for us, that are in it all day, every day, brother, and that certainly have spent so much time in building our careers and our lives the way we've wanted to and the way we have. It's just such a stark contrast. So it's nice to come back, be here, and enjoy it. So basically here every year now, as her parents, get a little bit older and are not as excited to do the, what ends up being a 20-hour ordeal, getting from here to the States.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Life that you don't have to take a vacation from right there, man.
Well, that's a great segue, brother, because that's actually what we were talking about last time. It just happened to coincide with me coming out this way. But this is exactly, for me, I'm going to speak for myself. This is what I consider, building a life that, you don't have to take a vacation from because, I've got a wonderful team of people that, are checking in with me and saying, hey, Eddie, what do you think about this? Do you approve this? Should we change that? So business continues, growth continues in order to, continue to do more of this. And that's the whole idea. I don't want to be working incessantly for the next 20 years, right? We've talked about this already several times as to how we design that. So back to your point, this is part of my design for the life that we want.
Well played.
The wine, the food, it's pretty great, man. So I know last time we talked about, we were talking about, more of the specifics and more of the sharing of the journey. I know we kind of, we talked a little bit more broadly. We referenced a few books that, that we were both fond of, especially you, that you went down, that you are revisiting because they kind of take on a new meaning as you read them 5, 10, 15 years later, whatever it was. What are some of those specific things that you feel like you would want to share with not only someone who's looking to build a team, but also just the independent agent? Not everyone, and you nailed it before, not everyone wants to build a team. It's not for everyone for many reasons. So what are your things? 2024 right now, the market that we're in right now, you're getting someone green onto your team. That let's just start with the agent. That agent, Alex, I'm here to listen. What do I need to do first?
I think, backing up. So if I was to kind of, and again, I think, I wouldn't want to do it over because I'm happy where I am. But if, speaking from the future to maybe someone, again, to right now, I would say first and foremost, two things. One is start to really visualize what you really want, because I think a lot of people just maybe especially in the beginning, like, I just want to do some deals, not even thinking about team. Or I get some people come in like, I want to start a team and do all this. It's like, well, you haven't ever sold a property yet, so let's start there. So it's kind of starting there of what do you want your life to look like? Because then you got to have a North Star. Like, that's where I want to go. There's going to be a journey going there, things I'm going to have to learn along the way, skills I'm going to have to acquire. So I think just the foundational level, really getting an idea of, hey, this is what I want my life to look like. And I think that's really important. I've been doing that recently, integrating it into my morning routine, doing visualization, 10 minutes, sitting there on a bench. I go out early in the morning for a long walk and push-ups and stuff. And I do it now. I sit kind of thinking about what the next chapter will be and how that will look. And I'm going to be next week down in Costa Rica, and hopefully we'll be able to get some internet down there and have a cool backdrop like you have. Yeah, so let's go back to that first agent, that new agent. They have to, in my opinion, develop their skills. So, like, let's say we're going to learn, you want to play basketball. You got to learn how to dribble before you learn how to shoot. That great movie Hoosiers, they got back to dribbling for days. John Wooden was a great example. He would teach his players who've been playing, John Wooden was a Hall of Fame basketball coach, and he would start off with, this is how you put your socks on. So backing up from that, I think that the foundational skills are really important, and that's why, for one of the things that's helped our team grow, and the agents that have never sold a deal before, help to get them more quickly to that first deal and then kind of start to compound that. So I think if anybody out there, we do a morning role play every day, 8 to 9. Like right now, I have someone on the team that is doing that. So that's kind of like next level once you get the team and getting people comfortable with presenting. So you don't have to be there for everything. And this is what kind of we're talking about. Hey, you got people in the States going, hey, we got this, Eddie. Do you approve this? Do you approve that? So you're still there. You're still touching it. You're still putting energy into it. But you obviously, developed those skills 20 years ago, like myself, and did them for 10, 15 years, and then started to develop your business. I don't know, I kind of spin it back to you on when you started, kind of getting out of production and doing more of the things that you really wanted to do. But I think that the role play, building skills, getting into a group as well. I'll kind of finish on this and then spin it back over to you, depending on what kind of questions you want to go to. I think you have to be in a daily cadence of prospecting. And there's a great book on prospecting by Jeb Blunt, Fanatical Prospecting, really great book. He did a lot of studies on how many calls it would take to make connections and all that kind of stuff. So, we have, for instance, every Wednesday, phone jam. We alternate the Wednesdays. We do phone jam, 10 to 12. Then we have dinner together, or lunch rather. That builds good community. We have, we kind of make it fun. So it's not just like this grind. So getting in with a group that at least, prospects each day, and work on those skills. So that was kind of a stump speech, but foundational level skills and then cadence of daily prospecting. That's where I would start.
So you're actually going through calls as a group, hearing each other, listening to each other, critiquing, giving feedback, this kind of thing?
For the phone jams or the morning role play?
For the morning role play.
So the morning role play, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, we do role play. So that's 8 to 8:30. We don't teach scripting. We do LP Mama, listing, price, motivation, agent, mortgage, appointment. There's two parts to motivation. When is somebody considering moving or selling? And then why. So the motivation is, so the understanding what that why is hyper critical. That'll help you understand where to put them in the contact management system, whichever one you use, of like, okay, hey, this is somebody this is watch or active. They all got different tags. And then on Thursdays, we integrate, into that. So it doesn't sound transactional, because if you're just like listing where, why, who, all those are very, very kind of transactional questions that you ask. So we sprinkle in, we call it, FORD. It's an acronym: Family, Occupation, Recreation, Dreams. Sprinkling that in to build rapport, to build trust, to build mutual understanding of, oh, you're from New York, or you're from here. I'm this fan. Oh, you got a Persian cat. Like, kind of trying to create mutual likes, so forth. So on Thursdays, we actually listen to live calls. So we have them recorded, Zillow calls, Google calls, and so forth. And we actually listen to live calls and then give feedback on, hey, I think you did this well. You could do this a little bit better. This is where I would have added that. Why did you say this here? So it creates this container of, feedback loop. Because if you're the only person in the feedback loop, unless you have a really, really high level of consciousness, you're probably not going to be really good at critiquing yourself. Although I do recommend listening to your calls. It's hard to do. I have a hard time listening to my own calls, watching my own video, that kind of stuff. So I think maybe that answered your question on how those mornings work.
Yeah, I mean, when you started right away with that, it's because you dove right into, we got to practice what you sound like, what you say, how to say it, and in the beginning, a lot of agents, especially if we take that avatar of someone that's brand new to the industry that comes to you and says, Alex, I'd like to learn. Will you take me under your wing and teach me, or bring me into the team? Those reps are so incredibly important, because you're not going to be an ace right out the gate. Certainly, it helps if you have a sales background or a customer service background. Might find it a little bit easier to get started. But getting those reps in is so incredibly important. I know I shared a number with you before, and it's a number that was built from data at one point, but it's just a number that, kind of like the way you have your acronyms, in order to create a system. Ours was 72. My number was 72, because it meant that I needed to have 72 conversations in order for that to translate into one check into my bank account. Like, literally, that was the number. And so for me and for the people I was training, I was trying to use that as a guide to let people know that you have to have these conversations in order to get, you're telling me you want to have 4 sales. Okay, so it's 4 times 72. Right? You want to have 4 sales this month, and it's 4 times 72. And that 72 could have been a phone call. It could have been the person that tapped you on the shoulder because you were wearing your badge, your badge, and then grocery store or something like that, was asking you a question. That exercise, that muscle, I think I love that you started that way, because regardless of your acronyms, my acronyms, this process, they all do have a lot of things related to each other, and that is doing. You have to do. Like, it's not going to happen if you say you're in real estate and you're not picking up the phone, you're not joining masterminds or practice sessions like you offer at your brokerage. It's not going to happen. That you can't wish it to happen. And what I'd like to always impart with people that are brand new is that the moment you start doing this and it becomes a habit, because then you touched on something really important, right? It's got to be scheduled, and you have to be very diligent and respect that time, whether it's Tuesday at 4, Thursdays at 10 a.m. for 3 hours, 2 hours, whatever it is, that accountability to yourself. And as I use accountability, it's also great. Another great part of being part of a team like with you is that, oh man, I told Alex I have to be there. I have to be there. I signed up, or I filled out the form, or I told them, I pledged, or whatever it was that it made you accountable to that. You've got to find that for yourself. And if you can't, this is what sometimes becomes challenging if you're an independent agent, or you're working with a small brokerage. It becomes a little bit harder unless you're really good. And let's be honest, a lot of us are not the best at that accountability. I'm one of them. I'm the first to raise my hand. There's plenty of ideas that I would like to have done. Even this show that we do together, it's like, until you and I just said, I shook your hand and I said, okay, Alex, I'll be there. That takes it to another level. And it was always a nice idea. I've always loved this idea. And you probably had this idea in your head too, to be able to do something like this. But until you make that commitment to yourself and to others, it's hard to stick to. But to your point, brother, I agree, man. It just has to be, you have to have it. You have to have that accountability. And then you can get into what is the tool, what are the 7 things I say, or the 8 things I do after I have that phone call, whatever those processes and procedures are. But it's got to start with working that muscle, right?
Yeah. It's the lifeblood. I think too many people have been kind of, maybe, I don't know if I want to use the term misled, but we talked about it before, the market that COVID was, and you didn't have to have skills. And I think people maybe got recruited by people that told them it was easy, or told them, yeah, no problem, or yeah, it's only, if you make this many calls. But I did want to kind of double click on what you said there. And I love that you knew your metrics, right? You knew it was 78 conversations. Now that's 78 conversations for Eddie. That's 78 conversations for somebody that has a backlog of understanding of the market, can speak to things fluidly, intelligently, and be able to really ask good questions. I think sometimes people think, I need to know it all. It's like, you actually don't need to know it all. You just need to know the right questions to ask. And then when people do ask you, hey, how's the market doing, or something like that, you don't stumble over. There's a lot of things you can get bound up in if you don't know what to say. I mean, I think one of the common things that people say here in Florida, at least, is, well, people are moving to Florida. 1,000 people are moving to Florida a year, and it's a good thing to own a home rather than rent. And it's like, those are really broad statements, and I don't think that they're very addressing the granular nature in a way of what people are asking about. Hey, what are interest rates doing, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, man, back to that. 78 is for Eddie. That new person coming in, it might be 150 and then eventually it might get down to 15, 20. For me, that's where it probably is. I'm not doing a massive amount of prospecting because I've done so much over the years. I've built the relationships, so I'm not having to have as many conversations. Further into that, the type of lead that you get. A Zillow lead, for instance, it's probably not 78 conversations. In fact, if you're paying for Zillow leads, it better not be 78 conversations, because your ratios, right? Your return isn't going to be there, right? So I think but one of the leads sources we have with Google are online. People are calling us. So there's different kinds of calls when people are calling you, or Zillow, people are reaching out. It's a different kind of lead. I don't know if I want to go too far down that line, but I just wanted to address that, hey, it might be 78, and that's why you do need to track your numbers. So you can start to see, hey, my numbers for conversations per deal is going down because my skills are going up.
Yeah, that's a great perspective too, in terms of whatever metric you obviously it's hard to have the data and the metrics until you've done enough, right? So you can have a generous pool of data to pull from. But once you do have that, it's a great way to take the temperature of your business currently. Where am I? Am I getting better? To your point, did I go from 78 to 108, or did I go from 78 to 48? Right. And then be able to understand, what's working. And of course, it's going to be a different mix for everyone, because then you're talking about, okay, well, what is my niche? Who am I talking to? How cold is that lead? How warm is that lead? All of these things are going to affect that number. But my point in saying that is, you have to, and you obviously echo it, is that you have to know what your numbers are so that you can improve upon that and see if that's working. Especially if you're at the beginning, how many calls did I make my first 90 days in real estate, and how many of those were hang-ups, people that hung up on me completely, versus how many did I have actually some nice 5-10 minute conversations, and then they deserve to be inside my database. And that leads me to another point. If we get real specific about the training, we talked about the training, what kind of tools would you suggest that somebody have that's getting started that they really need to have basically on day one? Obviously, I think we're going to quickly lean on a CRM, a competent CRM. And I know being inside of EXP and any of the large brokerages, of course, you typically have a robust CRM system to fall back on. But, how important is it for you and your team to be using that on the regular?
It's the foundation. So the skills and the technology, which is, you mentioned the CRM. So knowing how your CRM works, and again, that's going to help you with your numbers, right? You're going to know how many dials you made. You should be able to measure. I have my tracking sheet. It's not in front of me here right now because it just, having that CRM is hypercritical, and then understanding how to use the CRM. So I would say that's part of it. So your skills as far as conversations, LP Mama, Ford, whatever you want to do with Tom Ferry or Mike Ferry or whatever you want to get into scripting, that's fine. And then so skills, CRM, and then I would say knowing your numbers, meaning not the numbers of calls, but what's the market like? So if you're going to work with a buyer or a seller, I think it's really important to understand how to use even just MLS. We have another system called Trend Graphics, so that helps us understand the month supply of inventory and price per square foot over a certain period of time, so that you can understand how to speak to a buyer or seller about a particular property type that they're looking at. Is the value there? So understanding first how to have conversations, how to use the CRM to make your notes, when you're going to follow up, what kind of drip campaign is there, and then thirdly, the understanding of the numbers. You have to know how to do a CMA. I think understanding a macro level from month supply of inventory is important. I'll give you an example. Where I think people get into these sound bites of, you should circle prospect, or the Zillow leads are the best, or pay-per-click, or video, or whatever, right, to create conversations. We have a couple agents that do circle prospecting, and they'll do it around their open houses, so it's intentional. We had one guy that made a decent single agent living of around 50, 60 grand by doing circle prospecting just into neighborhoods. And there's another agent that would go in with him. He does it every Wednesday. So talk about cadence, talk about accountability, and it's double your database with Diango. And he's like, whoever wants to show up can come. And he coaches them. It's so wonderful because he gives back. But my point in this is there's another gal on our team, Jessica, right? And she does the circle prospecting with him. She's been doing it for, probably like 6 months. So that's helped to develop her skills. I don't think she's, my story here is one specific, meaning if you make enough calls, you are going to find somebody crazy enough, like total cold call, total out of the blue. They're not expecting you, nothing, right? Like totally cold. And she got a guy on the phone and she said, hey, just wondering if, you had any thoughts on selling. And he's like, she said he kind of paused on the phone and said, how did you know? And she's like, she kind of just, she goes, well, I didn't know. I'm just, calling people in the neighborhood, and there's low inventory, and we're looking for people that want to sell their properties priced right and get top dollar using our services type thing. And he's like, this is really strange. And it's kind of like a Carl Jung thing of a synchronicity. He was in sales too, so he kind of believed in the universe pointing in the right direction. And he goes, I'm literally coming down this weekend, and I'm interviewing agents to sell my investment property. And she's like, well, I'd love to meet with you. He goes, well, this is really serendipitous. And my point in this is she made all the calls, but she also had the skills. So she might have, say it was your first day and you made that call and you happen to hit that guy, if you don't have the skills, it's not going to turn into an appointment and probably not going to turn into a listing, right? So it's the accountability like we were talking about, it's the skills like we were talking about, it's the understanding the technology, and then it's the raw numbers of dials, and she happened to finally hit that guy, and then she had the skills. So she got the listing, and just the kind of as a story there. So it bothers me with these sound bites. Oh, you should circle prospect, or you should do expireds, or you should do this, or should. It's like, well, they all work. But if your skills aren't good, they're not going to work. So back to the skills. Right?
I love that you got there. Because that's kind of what I was thinking the whole time listening to you as you were kind of closing there. It's like, it all works. It all works. Yeah. I think one of the traps in real estate, especially if you're newer, I think, is that there's just so much sound bites, widgets, 1995s a month, all of this stuff that's draining you. Oh, that looks good, and oh, that looks good, and yes, and it probably does work. There are scams out there, but a lot of the stuff is fundamentally good if you do the thing. If you don't do it, then it's a complete waste, and it might as well have been a fraud because it's not going to turn into anything. So, you mentioned circle prospecting. That's one of so many ways. It's an effective way. And what I always try to find out when I'm first meeting with an agent, especially someone that's brand new in the industry, is, I need to understand who you are. Where is your skill set? Where are your strengths? And not to say that joining a mastermind or joining us on Thursday at such and such time or being present for this training, you won't improve and get better and learn. But I like to understand kind of where someone's sweet spot is. Like, that she's, the example you gave is clearly somebody who's, because she's been doing it, she's gotten to a point where she was able to, create the opportunity, but then close on that opportunity, right? And that's two different things, which you very clearly articulated. And that is very much the case. You could, Alex, generate leads for your team and literally hand good leads over. But if that agent isn't competent or practiced enough to close it, they're not. And then there's some on the opposite end that are so good that what looked like zero opportunity ends up being an opportunity. Because they maybe recommend you to somebody else. Hey, maybe I can't use you right now. I'm the customer. I don't have a need for your services right now. But I thought our interaction was so great, Alex, that my aunt down the street, she's thinking about it. Here's her number. Call her. And so that comes from having matured those skills, those sales skills, those communication skills to a point where those opportunities happen. And so, of course, if you combine the volume of calls, and I say calls, and obviously calls can be actual dials, or they can be online interactions, direct messaging, social media conversations, things like that. If you're not able to take it from here to here, then you're just not going to get there. And so that is so, so important. And then that third piece, which we kind of started with this conversation, is where are those kept? Where are those relationships and those conversations kept? Because, we are not AI, so we're not going to remember all of those conversations we had last week, what they said, what their dog name was, when are they planning to move, when are they coming down into town to look at properties. We have to have a repository for all of that makes sense to us so that we can go back and have those conversations. And I think that's probably the start. I mean, if I had to put a little bit of a bow, obviously this is a lead generation, building your business is such a long conversation. But I think if we started with kind of what are the fundamentals, those are the pieces, don't you think?
Yeah, so I think, we could beat a dead horse here, but we could go on and on and on. But I think those three main principles are: get your skills in order, get your technology in order, and what's the third one?
The fountain of leads. Actually, having the leads, being able to have those conversations, having the skills then to close that business, and then obviously having that repository or that CRM in this case to be able to nurture those further.
Yeah, and then I think we were going to go on from there. We were talking about building teams and kind of where do you go from there. I mean, you could, it depends on where you want to go from there. You want to stay as a single agent, maybe build. a team in that you have admin and that kind of stuff, and I could definitely kind of click on that because.
Well, let's be clear that you can build a wonderful business by being a solo agent. You absolutely can. And it also depends on, what market you're in, what you're making every single transaction. Are you selling $200,000 houses, or are you selling $2 million houses every day? That's also a component of this, of course. And then obviously what kind of work balance life you want for yourself. So work-life balance rather that you want for yourself. And so all those things kind of combine. But if you get to a point where, one of your exit strategies or your exit strategy is to say, I want to leverage my experience, build a team, and then have, be able to participate in the success of the team financially, then that could certainly be a way to go. And that's usually what the catalyst is for many to start a team, right? Because or you're doing so well in your lead generation and your closing that quickly the idea of having a team or having support seems like a really attractive one, especially if you're doing so much that the first kind of tug at you is man, I got to get a little bit more time to myself because I'm just running ragged everywhere, and I'm trying to start a family, or I have a family, or whatever your other responsibilities and interests are and priorities are. You start to think about, who's my first hire? And that's always a really kind of a big question, right? Like, okay, I'm thinking about starting a team, but maybe I'm already envisioning 5 people tomorrow. You typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least it was for me, how was it for you when you said, I'm going to start to grow? And I believe you've shared a story a little bit before about that first kind of assistant, right?
Yeah, that should definitely be, I would say, even if you're new, getting a transaction coordinator, I think I told the story before, but just to kind of maybe go back to that a little bit, that was when I learned about PIE time, PIE, productive time, indirect productive time, everything time, what the dollar per hour was, highest dollar per hour is that P time, productive time with somebody that's ready, willing, and able to buy or sell. Indirect productive time is what we've been talking about. That's prospecting to create the productive time. And then E time is everything else. So when we talked about that assistant, I learned about P time, and E time is the lowest dollar per hour. Usually that's somebody that you pay dollar per hour, whether that's, somebody put signs in the ground or enter things into MLS, or if you get to a certain point. Now I have kind of a personal assistant that washes my clothes, cooks my food, cleans the house. I need things printed, whatever. Like, that's somebody who actually lives in my house, and we have an arrangement. But I think that new agent, I think hiring a transaction coordinator, because now, back when I did the assistant, that was, I had to pay them no matter whether I closed or not. But now you can get transaction coordinators that will do it per deal. I mean, to me, if you're not doing that, and I hear this from people, well, when I'm doing enough deals, then I'll hire a transaction coordinator. And I'm like, that's not the way to go. But I don't believe it's the way to go. And here's why. Because if you understand PIE time, the E time that you're leveraging, especially with somebody that's only getting paid when the deal closes, so it's no money out of your pocket. So all of that, putting things in MLS, making sure things are compliant, deadlines, timelines, all that kind of stuff, probably, Eddie, when you put something under contract, that's, you still got another, 6 to 12 hours that is the things I just mentioned that go into it. So why would you leverage that? So the 6 to 12 hours that you would have been doing E-time, you can be doing a higher dollar per hour of the indirect productive time, which is prospecting, which is going to get you the higher dollar per hour. See what I'm saying? So that's why it's so nonsensical, and frankly, it's a scarcity mindset. People want to hold on. That's why people go to 100% brokerages. Well, I'm going to make more from my, hey, and it's like, my dad used to say, I probably shouldn't say it on here, but you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Meaning, that's my dad, and that's a 1980s saying. probably have to scratch from this because it's not, but you get what you pay for. You're at 100% brokerage. Great. You're keeping all your money, but you have zero support. And God forbid something really happens bad, you get sued or something like that. That 100% brokerage is not going to be there for you. So anyways, I guess my point in that is not to have a scarcity mindset. You want to be able to get some leverage. And I think that transaction coordinator from the first hire that you mentioned, that's the first hire. And then you can grow from there, depending on where you want to go. Because there's some people that are single agents, to your point, that do really, really well as a single agent. And they got like 3 personal assistants. Now it's all them. And, well, not all them. Everything still has to go through them for the most part. That's why I didn't want to go that route. Because it's like, I'm still not out. I still don't have a business because I got to go in and make the ice cream. I got to make decisions. I'm going to have to be talking to every single person that is a closing. I can't hand them off to the transaction coordinator completely. So that's why I didn't go that route, Eddie.
That's a great point. I mean, there is such a process you need to go through to really understand if you're really handing this off, or if you're still in the business. If you're still in the business, you may be scraping a few little items off your list, but you're still in it. If you're the bottleneck, if you're the funnel that everything has to pour through, then you really don't have a business. It's still a solo business, in my opinion.
Yep.
It's until you are able to, these things can happen because you've built the processes, the checklists, the systems. This is the way I need it to be done. Not until then, and you give that person or people or team or whatever full autonomy to do so based on those guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got something. And you were mentioning about this concept of, because it made me think of this. Kind of keeping it or hoarding the money. I don't want to spend it yet.
Yeah.
The missed opportunity from that, I just want to echo, because I know you kind of said it. The missed opportunity from that mindset is just incredible.
Yep.
I would encourage everyone to try to understand that. And I think that something that goes along with that, Alex, is, and I dealt with this, was the concept that no one can do it as good as I can.
Mm.
So the money was one thing, right? But somebody else can't. How can they be as bright as me, right? How can they know that this little detail needs to be handled in a certain way, or that step number 7 is probably really important in the 10 steps, and I kind of smile in a certain way, or I say it in a certain way, or I deliver it in a certain way, or my timing to bring that to somebody at a certain way at a certain time is only something I can do.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some truth in that, but by and large, to eliminate that is so critical. Like, no, there's plenty of talented people, and certainly more talented than you are in a lot of these things. And even if you were to stop and at the end of the day take account of everything, all the steps and the way they were performed, how everything played out, the idea then that if it was done at 70 or 80% the way you would have done it is still so much more valuable than holding on to that and saying, I have to do 100% of it 100% of the time my way, or it doesn't work. That's foolish. I went through that. I don't know how much of you went through that at all. I don't know, but I certainly did. And what helped me finally break through that was, I'll be quite frank, is I was looking at the clock. I was looking at the clock of life, and I was thinking, I've got to hand this over, because what am I supposed to be doing it this way for the next 20, 30, 40 years? No way. No way. So the minute I started to see it through that lens, I'm like, okay, yeah, I did, yeah. Even if it's at 60 or 70%, I'm cool. We gotta keep moving. And again, that's kind of some of that transitional thought. At least for me, it was in terms of transitional in my career and in my life.
I love that you brought up that concept of the lens. And I think the lens can get a little bit clouded sometimes with ego. And to your point, like, nobody can do it the way that I do it. Okay, well, there's truth in that, but it's not the whole truth. But if your ego is so strong that it makes that shred of truth the whole truth, to your point, the opportunity cost is you are losing. You're actually losing ground on dollar per hour. And look, it's not all about dollar per hour. I'm not just saying we put a label on people that they're worth this to me. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, we talked about the rich dad, poor dad, right? Like having money work for you, leverage. We talked about having people work for you. That increases dollar per hour, and ultimately it gets you to where you are right there with that beautiful background. That is leverage. Like you have leverage. If you had to do everything, that would be really tough to do from there, right? Like, just saying.
And if I could do it, it wouldn't be nearly as enjoyable. Even if I had to or could, this would not be nearly, because my head would be in the 74 things I got to think about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would not be fun. At all. This is the amount of work that I'm doing right now. And this isn't even work because I'm talking to my buddy. But I mean, this is in terms of obligation. This is the only obligation that I have. That's it, to be on this with you. But again, I'm enjoying this conversation, and it's fun to show other people, not from a bragging perspective, but it's like this, the stuff that we want to share with you is in case this kind of life aligns with what you want to do. It may not be at all, but this is it. But undoubtedly we'll run into a handful of people that are like, yeah, you know what, that's kind of very much in line with what I want to accomplish. Well, let me listen to see if there's a couple of things I can glean off of their conversation that would help me in the stage that I'm in right now in my career.
Yeah. Isn't it what most people envision, like, or why they do it to a certain degree, certainly money, but they're like, I hear most people say, I want freedom. And it's like, that to me, what you have right there, bro, is freedom. Me heading out to Costa Rica next week for heading out of town. I'll be out of town for 8 or 9 days. Sure, I'll check in. I've got AT&T Global and all that. But I'm not, to your point, I'm not going to be grinding while I'm over there. It'll be 15, 20 minutes. Maybe I'll spend 40 minutes a day, if that, man. I think that's why we got into it. We wanted the freedom, but then people get in, and then that lens that you mentioned is clouded with scarcity. Maybe it's ego and that belief of scarcity. Some people don't even know it's there until maybe somebody shows them, if they're open to it. But anyways, my point was, this is why a lot of people got into it, what kind of we're doing here. But I don't think they always get the right alignment with the right people that actually, A, of all, are doing it. And B, of all, maybe have some let's put it this way. I see some people doing some really big business that still have a scarcity mindset. And that might sound odd and kind of incongruent, but I see it because they're scrapping, man. They're scrapping in here. I wanted to mention this, man. There's two types of freedom to me. There's, when I think a lot of people think about it, and I did certainly until I kind of started to open up more into the second part of what I'm going to talk about. The first one is the quintessential freedom. Tony Robbins says it, to do what you want, when you want, how you want, with who you want. Like that, I got so much money that I don't have to worry about what I do, when I do, who I do it with. That's definitely a type of freedom, no doubt. But the second type of freedom, which is where that scarcity or abundance mindset lies, is freedom from. And what I mean by that is freedom from limiting beliefs, i.e., I need to have enough, it's just an example, I need to have enough business so that I can hire a transaction coordinator. When I have enough business, when I get really busy, I've literally heard this multiple times. When I get really busy, that's when I'll hire a transaction coordinator. And I'm like, that's not the time you hire them before, to your point, where you get all the systems and all that down so that I have a little bit of the hair goes up on my back when I hear people say they're busy. And I'm like, are you productive? Like, are you getting the most out of that time that you're busy?
Yeah.
Are you working on getting leverage so that maybe you don't have to be as busy? Do you want to be? Is that what you wanted? Now, that's what I thought I wanted in the beginning, Eddie. I was like, I didn't know anything, man. Like 20 years ago, I got in there and there was the agents that were doing deals and their phone was ringing constantly. And I was like, oh, I can't wait till I get there. And then I got there, and I was
in all fairness, it's hard to see that. Like, you're a bright guy then, you're a bright guy now, but I'm the same way. I couldn't see that far. Like, I needed to get to that first goal, which typically is, I want X amount of transactions, right? You can't possibly see that, right? So
true.
I think that's what some of the value is about our conversations, is that we're trying to help you see a few steps, not necessarily because you're about to apply those next steps, which are 14, step 14, 15, 14 through 20. I know you're not there yet, but if we say something that based on our experience, because we've taken those steps already, and it's like helps you align your steps moving forward from 0 or from 1, 2, 3 to 17 or 16 through 20, I think that's helpful. Like, I would have liked to have known that. Right? What do you think?
100%, dude. Thank you for cutting me off and articulating that so well. You're 100% right. And I think that has a lot to do with who you're around. So if you're in that group or whoever you're around, and they're just at that point, maybe you talked about 17 steps ahead, they're doing 40 deals, 50 deals, 60, whatever a year, and dude, I think I talked about this thing had it's me, not this thing, but it ruined some relationships. It tarnished my time with my daughter sometimes, because I was constantly looking at this thing because it represented money. And that's why I got into business, to make money, so I didn't have to work in a $1 per hour thing. But the point is that it did start to tarnish relationships. And if you're in that company of that person that is, 7 days a week, they're looking at their phone for the next deal, and they got to constantly be following up on every single maybe transaction that's going on, or they feel like they got a prospect on the weekends, God forbid, but that's actually a really good time to prospect, by the way. But God forbid for me, not for you at step number 1 and 2. Good time to prospect during the weekend. Don't take Alex's God forbid, I don't want to prospect on the weekend. Don't take that there. I love what you brought up, Eddie. We're talking step 17, 18. Now, we want to help you with steps 1 through 17, which we mentioned the first 3 things. Get your CRM in order, get, your lead sources, what are you going after, and get your skills down. Those are let's work on those for the first year, at least, right? And then by being around folks like us, when we come to the role play, we do a Zoom for those Wednesday phone jams. So you want to come and just be a part of that, be around that culture, and then keep coming to these. And maybe, if you want to talk about joining Eddie and I, we'll take some time here or there when it suits. Take a half an hour and say, okay, let's chart the course here. What are you working on? Where do you want to go? What are the next steps? So I think putting yourself around those right people for those eventual 17, then once you get to 17 step, 40 step, I don't know where I'm at in the steps as far as developing a team or whatever. I don't know. Maybe we can get a flow chart.
I love how you brought that all. I love how you brought that all back. You brought it back to the basic 3. And that is the starting point. Until you can be masterful at those basic 3, whether you're in year 1 or year 10 of your business, and you just haven't really gotten a lot of traction, and it hasn't been your number 1 priority because there's other income or there's other jobs, or the spouse is the breadwinner, so to speak, in a more traditional household, but you want to get serious. I mean, that's the foundation right there. And what I found ourselves doing, and I'll kick this to you right now, because I'm just having this thought right now, is, we keep going back to a more bigger picture view in our conversation. We keep bringing it back. Like, one of the initial ideas was that we would get really specific on certain things, and we have in this conversation. That I'm not missing that point whatsoever. But it seems like you and I seem to always pull it back to a broader perspective, and I wonder, if that's going to be kind of our cadence, kind of our thing, you know, and just it was just a thought that I had. I mean, I think because you could learn the tactics, and again, the tactics are out there. They're in books, they're in online courses, they're, you know, in EXP when you join. They're all there, but it's the why. You know, why am I getting up in the morning? Is this the right thing that I want to be doing? Is, you know, all of those, you know, what's my purpose? What am I trying to accomplish? You know, what are the priorities in my life? We seem to keep pulling it back to that, which I know is really helpful. And hopefully it's landing. What do you think about that? That's kind of my overview.
I think we're dancing between the duality of life. In this context, we could talk about the micro and the macro. You can't have the big without the small. From little things, big things grow. Like, they are intertwined. So the micro is, you mentioned it, when do you get up? What do you do? When do you do it? What's the intentionality around that day? Now, also then the macro is, okay, that's like moving I love how you mentioned, like, all right, I'm going to run this forward 10, 20 years from now. Am I still doing this 10, 20 years from now? How am I going to feel about that? I don't feel good about that right now. I don't want that to be. Okay, how do I not make that be, and what do I want that to look like? That's the macro, right? Like, starting to think about what you want your life to look like. So there is the daily cadence, which, you know, you practiced for the game, right? And then there's the playoffs, and then there's the Super Bowl, and then it's the next year. You know, it's like, but you're still daily. These are the things we're working on today that's moving us to that big picture, right? So that's why I still, again, will circle back around to that. If you're on that team or you're in that group and you look around that group and say, are these people where I genuinely want to be? And if they're not, maybe it's time to look for a different group. Does that tie it back in? Is that?
Yeah, no, it does. It was just more of an observation, kind of off the cuff observation as to kind of where we are, and just listening to our podcast, listening to our show, as to kind of where we decide to take the conversation sometimes. And it was just, like I said, a momentary thought in terms of where we are, and I wanted to just get your take on that. But let's bring it really back to like today, like when this episode airs, which will be in a few days from the shooting. We're going to be closing in on 30 days from the time that the new NAR rules have taken into effect. Mm-hmm. Give me a little bit of a snapshot. And I know I didn't prep you with any of this, but I love that, because then you can really give me a snapshot as to kind of where your head is. How's the team performing? How are they reacting? What kind of kickback or any at all are they getting? What has changed in your processes and your procedures for molding into this new normal, if you will?
Mm-hmm. Specifically into the NAR thing, and I think, again, the group you're around, shameless plug, EXP was great, having all kinds of masterminds before it was coming up. And frankly, Eddie, a lot of it was pretty confusing because there was mixed messages even coming from EXP. So, and not that EXP didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on. So, but at least we felt like we were on the forefront of understanding what we could, and then there were still questions. And so we had a mastermind every Thursday, just kind of going, okay, this is what we know at this point. Here's the things we know, and here's the questions that we still need to have answered as a mastermind, as a little group, right? And then in role play, we would role play the buyer broker conversation. Example, somebody says, oh, I heard that, how is this new thing affecting? So buyer's agents aren't going to get paid anymore? Like, okay, well, how do you answer that question? Right? Like, you got to rep that question, do reps onto that question. Going further into that, so where we're at right now, and it has been integrated, is because we prepared, because we felt comfortable with what we were going to say when the questions were asked, it made it a lot easier. It's kind of like, go try to play the game and not have practiced. You're not probably going to do too well unless you're just a hyper natural athlete. To your point, some people aren't natural salespeople. And even if they are, you still need to learn the particulars of the product, right? As a salesperson. So it's been pretty seamless for us, man. For me, I've had a couple people sign them. And what I'll say into that is that if you have your value proposition down, there aren't going to be objections. If you're able to articulate your value, it eliminates objections. So I haven't had any objections in the 3 that I've had signed, and I'm really not working with buyers anymore. There are more organizations that I work with that, I've pledged as on the board of directors and all that kind of stuff. But it has been, as a side note to that, it actually helps to filter people out. Meaning, when they're kicking back, both, I haven't really seen the agent attrition that I maybe thought would have happened. I'm not really paying as close attention to that as I could to really answer that or to address it. But now customers. So, yesterday one of the agents on the team was telling me about how somebody was like, well, I'm not paying that. I'm not doing this. I'll work with an agent that'll work for free. And she was like, okay. So she's going to go and prospect and find somebody that wants to receive the services that she's ready to deliver and be compensated. And of course she's going to do her best to get the commission from the sellers. And that's another conversation in there. But man, to answer your question directly, it was a lot less friction because we went with the little micro frictions for weeks and weeks and weeks beforehand. So when the date hit, it wasn't cramming for the test. We literally had agents calling us, calling our transaction coordinator, who they worked with that transaction coordinator, saying, I have no idea what is going on. My company hasn't let me know. Now, some of them haven't been doing the work too, but they weren't in the group that pushed them into doing the mastermind, role-playing these things, and they're scrambling. So I think that micro daily working on the buyer broker, and one thing that we have honed in on more, Eddie, is in-person meetings. When is a good time when we can meet before we go out and see properties for 20 minutes or so, and I'm going to go over what my pledge is to you and what our relationship will look like, and and then we'll go out and see these properties. So meeting in person really establishes that relationship rather than just meeting people at a property and kind of the assumed relationship that happened for many, 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 many years, because in some certain states you had to do buyer broker, but not in Florida. Meeting in person has helped the agents filter, and so filter the ones that I don't want to meet. So if you don't want to meet, would you meet with your attorney before you went to court or something like that? Would you want to meet with your doctor, or is it just let's just go, let's go into surgery? No, let's meet and talk about everything. What's this going to look like? What do I need to do? How do I need to prepare? What's this relationship look like? And it really kind of lays that foundation for the relationship from the start. So that's one of the things that we have changed a little bit, or it's helped us hone to meet in person.
I love that filtering mechanism. That's wonderful. I think anytime you can get, and again, this is something that I think you learned later on in your career when fortunately you've got a good book of business and you are busy and you're clearly worth what you're worth, is the ability to give yourself that empowering moment to say, you need to meet this criteria, otherwise we can't work together, right? And so that's really important for yourself to honor the work that you do and the professionalism that you bring, but also just as a business practice, just to kind of, okay, I wish you well. I hope it works out for you. I'm just not the right person for you. Be able to get to a point where you can articulate that to somebody else who's expecting you to bend over backwards and do all the things for them without anything in return is, it's a really nice place to be as an agent.
Yeah. Yeah. And also kind of come back to abundance and scarcity. If you have a scarcity mindset, a lot of people will run around for that one deal, and just like gripping on, I need it. And they just will hang on to any shred of a possibility of a deal. And you're blowing hours on that relationship that you're just kind of like, you haven't established the relationship. You haven't established that we're working together. And we have a document that articulates that this is, this is a contract.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get your take on that. Just to see kind of how the vibe has been these first 30 days or so on the interactions with the consumer and how it's going to mature, how it's going to change. And it really hasn't been as bad as I think many people may have thought it was going to be. And it's like anything else. It's just it's a new process. And I think educating the consumers it's one thing for us to be educated, but this is our job. So we need to be educated, and we have leadership, inside of our brokerages to help us with that, like you've shared. But it's a whole other thing to then pivot and articulate or educate the consumer that you're going to serve, because they're not in this bubble, right? They're not getting all the nitty gritty, the detail, bombarded with all the information as to how to do this new thing. So a big part of that is going to be educating them. And in that is I think the golden opportunity, which is to demonstrate, because like you said earlier, before we didn't have to really demonstrate anything. Oh, okay, I'll meet you there at 5, no problem. Are you pre-approved? I mean, you would do that, right? You pre-approved, let me tell you about that. Yeah, we've got it. Can you please forward it to me? Great. Now you've got it. That was basically it. I'll meet you there at 5. But the rapport building really had kind of fallen to the wayside. And so now that we have to demonstrate, what our value is, and it just, it's good for the industry. It's good for the industry, and it's good for our business. Mm-hmm. So as much as it may have been a little cumbersome here going into it, or the natural fear, like anything else, when something's about to change, I think it's been a good thing, and I think it will continue to be.
I agree. Yeah.
So this was, I love that we ended on something that was a little bit more practical, but I always enjoy our conversations, man. I mean, so next week, are you going to be already gone, or is it the following week that you're going to be in Costa Rica?
Yeah, it's next week. So so we shoot on Thursdays, and I'm going to look at a piece of property for another endeavor that I'm looking into. I have, 4 cash flow businesses right now, and I'm looking at another opportunity for a wellness center. I believe in personal development, and so we're looking at a project down there that's already kind of going. They grow their own food, and they have Malokas, and kind of work in a little small Airbnb property, and they're interested in owner financing. So a partner and I, a guy that I went to Peru with, that I've been doing a lot of personal development stuff with, going to look at this project. So I'm hoping that I am going to make a conscious effort to make sure I can find some internet in the jungle, and hopefully maybe have a sloth on my shoulder for you next week, bud.
Building the life that you want. I mean, this is what we're talking about. And none of this comes from an arrogant space between you and I. And this is just, we want you to see this is the culmination of some of the decisions and some of the decisions and the strategies that we're sharing with you. So if any of this aligns with you, please stay tuned. I'd love, hopefully you get connected in the jungles of Costa Rica, my friend. And until next time, everyone, please subscribe if you're not subscribed already. We'd love to have you on board, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, pal.